The 2008 stock market crash was a severe economic crisis that affected the world's economy. The market crash was caused by a lack of regulation in banks. Banks were giving loans to people that could not pay the money back. Instead of banks being more selective with who they loaned money to, they gave money to almost anyone who applied. Today's banks rely on a credit system that only gives loans to people with good credit. This, of course, came as a result of the 2008 stock market crash. Another cause of the market crash was the disparity between the amount of houses on the market and the amount of people that needed houses. Due to the lack of regulation in banks, real estate prices rose because too many people were taking out loans. This meant there were too many houses on the market that were not affordable due to the increase in real estate prices. As a result, banks failed because people could not pay the banks back. Since banks were shutting down, people were losing jobs, which created a downward spiral for the economy. This is how the stock market crash began.
Apple's up more than 6% right now. Google about 3%, but Dell, Intel, Research Motion, and Microsoft are all to the upside. Look how strong.
Did not disappoint. 400 points higher. Yes, indeed. The market's roar higher. Last 30 minutes of trading as volatility once again rules the day.
Most of the techs this morning, if not all of them, have just exploded to the down 1.7% here, a loss of 37 points or so. Apple shares are just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%. Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%.
The stock market is now down 21%.
Because we're now down 43%.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Two-year no yields went from 190 to 166 in the blink of an eye.
On the NASDAQ, everything and more has been completely wiped out.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Traders here working the phone say a lot of their customers are freaked out, waiting to see how low the Dow will go. They're focused on the Dow, not so focused on OPEC. Yes, OPEC did cut production by 1.5 million barrels per day.
Really, you're seeing just broad-based declines across all of the major technology sectors. Apple's under pressure, Yahoo down 8.5%, Cisco 6.5%, Research in Motion 10%.
And we're not getting the bid wanted. We're not getting the stop trading, and we see where the buyers are. We're just, every day they're pounding it.
The heightened financial turmoil that we have experienced of late may well lengthen the period of weak economic performance and further increase the risk to growth.
Can't look at it after you buy it because it's so horrible.
But we've had an 8-day losing streak in the Dow that in percentage terms puts it on par, close to the loss suffered in that crash in 1987, close to that percentage loss those 2 days in 1929.
Hello, Americans. We live in a world in which our economies are interconnected. Prosperity and progress have reached farther than any time in our history. Unfortunately, as we have seen in recent months, financial turmoil anywhere in the world affects economies everywhere in the world. And so, this weekend, I'm going to host a summit on financial markets and the world economy with leaders from all around the world, from developed and developing countries that make up 90% of the world's economy. Leaders from the World Bank, from the International Monetary Fund, will meet at the White House and have a dinner. We will meet most of the day on Saturday. The leaders attending this weekend's meeting agree on a clear purpose: to address the current crisis and to lay the foundation for reforms that will help prevent a similar crisis in the future. We also agree that this undertaking is too large to be accomplished in a single session. The issues are too complex, the problem is too significant to try to resolve, or to come up with the reasonable recommendations in just one meeting. So this summit will be the first of a series of meetings. It will focus on 5 key objectives: understanding the causes of the global crisis, reviewing the effectiveness of our responses thus far, developing principles for reforming our financial and regulatory systems, launching a specific action plan to implement those principles, and reaffirming our conviction that free market principles offer the surest path to lasting prosperity. First, we're working toward a common understanding of the causes behind the global crisis. Different countries will naturally bring different perspectives, but there are some points in which we can all agree. Over the past decade, the world experienced a period of strong economic growth. Nations accumulated huge amounts of savings and looked for safe places to invest them. Because of our attractive political, legal, and entrepreneurial climates, the United States and other developed nations received a large share of that money. The massive inflow of foreign capital, combined with low interest rates, produced a period of easy credit. And that easy credit especially affected the housing market. Flush with cash, many leaders issued mortgages and converted them into complex securities designed to yield large returns. These securities were then purchased by investors and financial institutions in the United States and Europe and elsewhere, often with little analysis of their true underlying value. The financial crisis was ignited when booming housing markets began to decline. As home values dropped, many borrowers defaulted on their mortgages, and institutions holding securities backed by those mortgages suffered serious losses. Because of outdated regulatory structures and poor risk management practices, many financial institutions in America and Europe were too highly leveraged. When capital ran short, many faced severe functional jeopardy. This led to high-profile failures of financial institutions in America and Europe, led to contractions and widespread anxiety, all of which are contributed to sharp declines in the equity markets. These developments have placed a heavy burden on hardworking people around the world. Stock market drops have eroded the value of retirement accounts and pension funds. The tightening of credit has made it harder for families to borrow money for cars or home improvements or education of the children. Businesses have found it harder to get loans and expand their operations and create jobs. Many nations have suffered job losses and have serious concerns about the worsening economy. Developing nations have been hit hard as nervous investors have withdrawn their capital. From here, we have to move forward and figure out a response to these situations. We live in a crisis, and we must band together as Americans and figure this out. George Bush for president. Thank you.
How did the 2008 stock market crash affect the way you lived?
The way we lived?
Yeah.
I worked more hours and we didn't spend as much money.
Alright.
You gotta give more answer than that.
Did it make life more difficult for you?
No, I don't think it made it more difficult. More stress at work, but no more difficult than normal.
Okay.
Is that when I lived at home, when I was working, or when I was...
And, how do you think the crash was resolved?
How was it resolved?
Yeah, how'd they fix it?
They changed accounting procedures to not make the mark-to-mark accounting anymore. But all in all, I think the subprime just worked itself out. The ones that defaulted, and the ones that weren't. And the market caught its breath and got its legs back under it and turned around and went up.
As you can see, there are many people that are affected by the 2008 stock market crash. It affected people's lives, and they had to work more, and it was harder to maintain a living. And these things eventually were resolved by the change in practices, the way, like Chesley's dad said, accounting procedures, and not making sure that banks wouldn't just give out loans to anybody so that the economy, can't suffer. The housing market eventually fixed as more people, bought houses. So everything eventually came into fruition, and that's what happened in 2008 for the stock market crash.